I'm not happy about this chart again, and the reason I'm not happy about this. Okay, let me get my mic back. So, as I was saying, I'm not happy about this chart, and the reason why I'm not happy about this chart is because it's playing out exactly as I was worried that this chart would actually play out. And when I say that, we broke down below this trend line that we've been in since the 1st of April, and we broke down below the trend line, and I'm looking at it on the 1 hour chart, and what you can see is we broke down, and now we had the pump on Bitcoin, and now we're just simply retesting it, and hopefully we don't break down again, because if we break down again, it basically takes us back down into this flag over here, which is something that I have been worried about for a few days. Now, to make matters even worse, this is happening on the eve of the FOMC. So today is the FOMC. It's Powell's last FOMC, believe it or not, because the next FOMC is on the 17th of June. And by that time, the new Fed chair should actually be, and that's a guy called Kevin Warsh. Now, I don't know if you guys heard his testimony, but he has very different ideas to basically how Powell's been running the Fed, right? And what we know is that every time that we've had an FOMC in the last, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times, every single time that we've had an FOMC, the numbers actually start moving down, or Bitcoin price actually starts moving down after the FOMC. So let's have a look. That's the one FOMC, and Bitcoin went down 7% after. That's the second FOMC, Bitcoin went down after. It's the third FOMC, Bitcoin went down after. So when you get a breakdown in the chart over here on the eve of the FOMC, it makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable, right? Now, tonight in the FOMC, as I said, we're definitely not getting a rate cut, and I'm also definitely not getting any viewers on my screen, or am I? Yeah. So we're definitely not getting a rate cut. There's a 100% chance of no rate cut. But I think that Powell has to address, before he leaves, I think he's going to address the inflation situation. Now, we have an inflation situation because of the war, as you can see over here. The inflation went up from 2.4% to 3.3%. So we do have an inflation situation. I think Powell will address the inflation situation. I think one of the things that's going to come out of it is that Powell's going to basically say, look, at the Fed, we're going to look at the data, and if the data doesn't necessarily change, and then we're going to have to start to manage the interest rates accordingly. That is what Powell would say, but the market kind of knows that as soon as Powell's out, you've got a guy called Kevin Warsh coming in. Kevin Warsh actually has different views. He wants to actually manage the Fed by reducing the Fed's balance sheet, right? So basically, he wants to drop rates, and he wants to use the Fed's balance sheet to increase and to reduce the amount of money in circulation. So just like in a nutshell, how that basically works is, effectively what he does is he will reduce interest rates. That's what he wants to do. And at the same time, after reducing interest rates, by increasing or by reducing the Fed's balance sheet, he will take money out of circulation. So how you do that is the Fed sells assets off its balance sheet. So let's say the Fed's got $1 billion worth of T-bills on their balance sheet. You take that and you sell it into the market, and you take $1 billion of cash out of the market. And that is, while the interest rates go down, you're taking cash out, which is, by the way, the opposite of what the Fed's doing at the moment. Right now, the Fed's keeping interest rates unchanged. And when the Fed's keeping interest rates unchanged, effectively, what they're doing is they're slowing down. They're keeping the economy slow. But if they reduce interest rates, they are increasing the speed of the economy, so to speak, the veracity of the economy. But then they're taking money out of the economy, which does the same thing. Right now, the Fed is putting more money in the economy. In the last couple of weeks, the Fed is putting $200 billion into the economy. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to listen. We're going to listen to what Powell says, but I think we do this all knowing that Warsh is coming in. Now listen, if you haven't watched my video about the new Fed and basically the new Fed and who Kevin Warsh is and how he's thinking, watch this video. It's on the Crypto Insider channel. Tell Johnny to put a link into that Crypto Insider channel, video, because I think that link, that video really tells you what kind of Fed you can expect under Kevin Warsh. I mean, you can read this. It says, in written answers to the Senate, Warsh re-emphasized that he does not think inflation statistics are accurate in his testimony, and he suggested using the trimming mean, which throws out the outlier pricing, which is currently changing it. He says, wake up, folks. Besant is calling the shots, and Warsh is going to cut short-term rates. They are going to cut short-term rates, and that's exactly what my video says. But the question is, what happens to long-term rates? And that's rates that the Fed can't actually deal with. So that's the big FOMC tonight. It's not the only thing that I'm worried about tonight. By the way, guys, welcome. Sorry, I forgot to welcome you guys. Welcome on the night of Powell's last FOMC. Remember, if you're not a subscriber, subscribe to the channel. If you are here, do me a favor. There's 500 of you watching and there's 77 likes. So let's try and get the like to viewers ratio to go slightly higher. As I said, it's not the only thing I'm worried about today. It's actually quite a big day today. Why? Because we have US oil inventories that's coming out in about an hour. We need to see what the oil inventories are like, because if the oil inventories drop during the war, or there's a big drop in oil inventories, that could be quite a big problem. Then at 2 o'clock, we have the Fed interest rate decision, then the 2:30 Powell speech, and then the problem is that we get earnings, right? So the problem with the earnings is the following, right? It's a big day for earnings. Some of the companies that are reporting, Google, Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, all of these are reporting today. And that could shock the markets, right? That could shock the markets. A lot of the earnings come down to how much of this AI boom is actually happening. And you can see all 4 of those companies are big players in the AI boom. What you can also see is that, some of the companies that are reporting today are the same companies that make up this IGV ETF. Right? Remember the IGV ETF. For those of you who don't know, it's a software ETF, right? And it's got companies like Microsoft, Salesforce, Palantir, etc. And I don't know if you remember, but we showed you guys that Bitcoin, which is the blue line over here, basically tracks the IGV ETF unbelievably well. Like you can see how closely Bitcoin tracks this IGV ETF. Now, the reason why this worries me is because they're so perfectly correlated. If we get bad earnings from, say, for example, Microsoft tonight, and the IGV ETF actually comes down, then the problem is that maybe Bitcoin will follow. And as you can see, the only reason why Bitcoin has done well in the past couple of weeks and months is because the IGV ETF's gone up. So we keep our eyes on the earnings reports from the IGV ETF. We also, last night, Robinhood reported earnings. The earnings, to be honest, weren't bad. Slightly below expectations. So the earnings per share was 0.38 instead of the 0.39. But the market didn't like the earnings. The market didn't like what they saw. And if you look at Robinhood today, Robinhood is actually down 11.8% today. So question why? Why is the market so, what's the word, angry? Can you say the word angry with Robinhood? When they just missed this. I think it's got a lot to do with crypto, actually, funny enough. So if you look at Robinhood's crypto revenue, so you look here, you say the net deposits were 17.7 billion. So net deposits actually grew 22%. Earnings actually grew. Transaction-based revenue actually grew. But the thing is that crypto-related revenue declined 47%. And I think the market was counting on a lot more crypto-related revenue from Robinhood. And I think that that's basically why Robinhood got punished. So Robinhood getting punished at the moment, down 11 or 12%. Right now, down 12%. Not good. Not good. We look forward tonight to Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and Meta. And that comes a couple of hours after the after the FOMC. So today, I think the message here today is get ready for volatility. Get ready for volatility. There's definitely going to be volatility today. Let's look at the next thing, and that is the war situation. So this is a real post. I know it's hard to believe, but this is actually a real post from the President Trump. Says Iran can't act together. They don't know how to sign a non-nuclear deal. They better get smart soon. No more Mr. Nice Guy. And you can see that he's basically, in a way, he's basically threatening them and saying, look, we're going to go and we're going to basically, if Iran can't come to some kind of deal very, very soon, then no more Mr. Nice Guy, whatever that means. I think the important thing here that we need to look at is that he also tweeted, he said, Iran just informed us that they are in a state of collapse. They want us to open the Strait of Hormuz as soon as possible while they try and figure out their leadership situations, which I believe that they will be able to do. Thank you for your attention in this matter. This relates to the fact that this message over here, which says, while the surviving Iran IGRC leaders are trapped like drowning rats in a sewage pipe, Iran's creaking oil industry is starting to shut down production thanks to the US blockade. So Iran are basically saying to the US, look, we ain't going to negotiate with you until you lift the blockade. The US is saying, look, we ain't going to lift the blockade until you negotiate. And that's pretty much where we are. I still maintain my view here that there's going to be an attack. And in the meantime, the US is also targeting Iran with a whole lot of other things, right? So as Besson says, the Treasury Department, through economic fury, has targeted Iran's international shadow banking infrastructure, access to crypto, shadow fleet, weapons, procurement, funding, etc. Under the President of the United States' maximum pressure campaign, Tehran inflation has doubled and its currency has rapidly depreciated. Karj Island, Iran's primary oil export terminal, is soon nearing storage capacity, which will force the regime to reduce oil production. So basically, they're at a point now where they're putting max pressure on Iran to basically come up with a deal. I think it's much more complicated than meets the eye here, because number one, who are you negotiating with? Number two, are they mandated to actually negotiate with you? I mean, in other words, when they come to a deal, can they actually implement the deal? Who's actually in charge? Who's actually really in charge of Iran? And I think that's much more complicated than we actually think. In the meantime, Pakistan getting involved in the war, they opened up 6 land corridors to basically allow stuff to flow out of Iran without actually using the strait. So it's getting super complicated when it comes to war. Again, I think that when it comes to war, prepare yourself for I call this the flapping fish theory. I told you what the flapping fish theory is before. I'll tell you again. When you take, I came up with this theory myself, which is probably why you haven't heard of it before. The flapping fish theory says the following. When you disrupt something big in the world, what happens is, first, there's a lot of noise around the disruption. So it's like taking a fish out of water. And the fish basically starts to flap as hard as they can. But then over time, the fish flaps less and less because it's running out of air and because the flaps aren't as effective anymore. Until you think the fish is dead and it's lying there and it's like you think it's going to be peace and you think Iran's at peace. And then you get like one big flap from the fish. And then like that's what I think is going to happen now. I think we're at the point now where, you know, it's calmed. There's been a ceasefire for a couple of weeks. But I think there needs to be some kind of escalation. And so my case here is to be short rather than long. Rather be short now. And I think that's what I'm going to do now in the competition. I'm actually going to swing. I'm going to swing from I think I'm in a long position on the terminal. Let's quickly have a look here. I think I'm in a long position here. As you can see, I am in a long position here. Let's just see, can I actually get my terminal back in action? Okay, so I think I'm going to close this position. I made a little bit of a profit in this position. I think I'm actually going to swing short. So yeah, I think I'm actually going to swing short here. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a $50,000 Bitcoin short. Cool. I don't have enough margin in this account. Lovely. Let's try and reduce that a little bit. Okay, the sell order has been placed. I'm now short. And the reason why I'm short is exactly what I explained to you. You can see I took the trade inside the news terminal. We'll talk about the news terminal in a couple of seconds. And the reason is because I just think right now the risk reward is that I think there'll be an attack before there's a peace deal. And when there is an attack, the markets are going to go crazy because they're going to realize the Strait of Hormuz isn't going to be open and there's more disruption to the world's oil, etc., etc. Now, speaking of disruption to the world's oil, I know everybody read the headlines yesterday, and that is the big headline yesterday was the fact that the UAE is basically leaving OPEC, right? So we'll talk about this a little bit now. I'm going to make a video just when I'm finished here. I'm going to leave here and make a video about what this actually means, because I've done a lot of research about the UAE leaving OPEC. So first of all, you need to understand what OPEC actually is. OPEC is a cartel. It's a legal cartel. And the cartel basically controls 40% of the world's supply of oil. So in the cartel, or OPEC was founded in the 1960s. It was founded by 5 nations that were combined some of the biggest oil producing nations in the world. So it's Iraq, it is Saudi Arabia, it's a whole lot of other nations. And effectively combined, OPEC controls 40% of the world's global production. Now, basically what happens is OPEC meet in Vienna. They meet, I think, once a month. And in that meeting, they decide how much each country will produce. And by doing that, effectively what they do is they control the supply of oil. And when you control the supply of oil, and the demand remains consistent, then effectively you control the price of oil. That's what OPEC actually does. But now, the thing with oil is, or the thing with OPEC is, that it only works if everybody participates. Because if one country pulls out of OPEC or doesn't respect what OPEC actually does, then effectively you've got a situation where the whole cartel can actually fall apart. Now, I think that the UAE leaving OPEC basically dealt a death blow to OPEC. And I think as a result, in the long term, world oil prices are going to go down, but not before the end of the war. I'm going to break it down in a full video. I'll make that video later on today, and I'll drop it on the other channel later on today. Someone says, prove your positions. I think you saw me taking the positions. Yeah. I mean, I'll read you guys this. It says, warning, everything changes. After 60 years, UAE just left OPEC. Now they've got no more production caps, no more export limits, and no more quotas. And it's going to affect a whole lot of markets. OPEC has always been a supply control. Supply control keeps prices elevated, but when a major producer steps outside the game, that's when everything changes. And I think that that's basically what's happening. And what you'll see in the video is that I also think that the biggest beneficiary of the fact that OPEC breaks down is the United States. And I think that they were actually behind this. And that's what you'll see later on when I make the video. So that is what happens when it comes to markets, what happens when it comes to Bitcoin. Again, we're watching for the FOMC, we're watching for the earnings reports. That is what we're watching if you're trading markets. The next thing is if you're trading altcoins. So if you're trading altcoins, I mean, that's what the market basically looks like today. Doge had a good breakout, which is like weird, but also good. Usually, Doge is the first coin to run before markets actually start running. The other one that I think we should talk about is Pump.fun. And I don't know if you guys saw the announcement when it came to Pump.fun, but ultimately, you know, Pump.fun has been using 100% of their revenue to buy back their tokens for the last year. And people were skeptical that they could continue to run a business while burning 100% of their tokens, right? So like they spent $370 million buying 36% of the circulating supply to gain the trust of the community. So they've switched that lever off and they've gone from 100% to 50%. Okay. Why? Because it's more sustainable from a business point of view. I mean, it's crazy to take 100% of your revenue and burn it. And I think Alon said it. He said, you know, I want to give more context in the big picture. Over the last 9 months, 100% of the revenue went into buybacks. Basically, no other platform in crypto has done that. He says, however, that people didn't trust us. And so they went to 50. Now they've gone to 50% programmatic buying for the next year. And that's basically what they're doing. Now, I want to show you this. I think it's quite important. This comes from one of our people in our group. His name is Joe. He says, pretty insane use cases for the terminal last night. After the Aave fork, I set a user-wide alert to alert anyone if there's a movement of over $200 million on chain. It caught the Pump.fun burn as it happened. Then Pump.fun tweeted it 9 minutes later, which means that if you were using the news terminal, right, you would have picked up what Pump.fun was doing 9 minutes before they tweeted it. You could have taken the long, and I just want to show you what happened if you had taken that long. So I'll go into the 1 hour chart. That's what happened. You would have taken this long over here. This is the long that you would have taken if you would have caught that pump. You would have taken that, and you can see you would have caught that wick over here. And you would have made yourself 16%, and if you leverage that 10x, you would have made yourself 170%. So that is what the news terminal basically does, right? The news terminal has all the big sources of news, and the AI basically says every time a responsible and a credible news source actually tweets something, you can basically trade directly from the news terminal in milliseconds, right? So for example, if I want to trade, I don't know if I can trade Meta, but let's try. If I want to trade Meta, because this came out from 𝗙𝗏𝗏, I basically go to the news terminal and I trade. Oh, I traded Meta. I'm now long Meta before the earnings. You see, I'm long $1,000 worth of Meta before the earnings. So the reason why I tell you this is because this market's moving on headlines at the moment, right? And I think it's super important that in this market you are able to trade you're on the headlines. Now, this is why we built the news terminal. It's a bunch of AI agents that scour the internet. They backtest which accounts actually move markets. And then every time those accounts actually tweet or post on Truth Social or in Discord, that actually comes into the news terminal. It comes there in a matter of milliseconds, as you can see over here. You can see the number of milliseconds it took to get there. And you can then trade directly from the news terminal. That gives you an unbelievable advantage in this time. Now, I want you guys all to experience that advantage. And so again, what I've asked the guys to do is to make it free. You can go to this link over here. Okay? So again, you can go to this link over here, and you can click here, and you can get the terminal for free. Free after for the first month, basically use it for free. Trade directly from the terminal. Understand how powerful and solid news trading actually is. And then once you've done that, let me know what you guys actually think. Cool. Also, look, there's a free newsletter. We have a free newsletter, as you can see. It really covers everything that I've spoken about before I speak about it. If you want that, again, there's a link below. Free newsletter. Today is a free day. It's like free newsletter, free newsletter, free newsletter, free 247 terminal. Everything is free today here on Banter. I do also believe that we will cover the FOMC tonight. I'm not going to be here, but I think Sheldon's going to do it, or Chento's going to do it. One of them is going to cover the FOMC tonight. I'll be watching with you guys. What else? I think that's it. Let's quickly look. Is there anything else that's happening? Let's look at the newsroom and just see, is there anything else that's happening at the moment? Nope. Not much going on. Netanyahu may head to Washington for the Trump-led ceasefire push. Okay, that's not really big news. Cool, my friends. I shall see you guys again tomorrow. Until then, trade well, my friends.